Thank you. So thank you for having me in the conference. And today I would give an overview of the digital protest tactics in Hong Kong, which some of you might be familiar. That Hong Kong activists are heavily using the telegrams and also all other digital tools to enhance their protest tactics. So I will just give a quick overview of the different tactics we use and evaluate their effectiveness, and then raise a couple points about the risk and bottleneck that we have encountered in the past 15 months. Hong Kong has become a very different place since the initial protest in June last year in 2019. The repressions from the governments and also the surveillance tool that are used by the government has rapidly evolved it, and we are facing a lot of bottleneck. Even we are using all those digital tools to try to overcome those difficulty and try to create a massive decentralized movement. So I would take a deep dive in evaluating this tool's effectiveness, risk, and bottleneck. And frankly, I'm not a hacker, so I don't have all the answers about how to mitigate the risk and bottleneck. But I hope that this overview can also give us a sense of how this protest tool is used in reality and how we can improve them in the future so that we can enhance the power of the people in overcoming the tyrannies of the regimes. And lastly, this is somewhat a philosophical discussion, but I feel it is also important in advancing our capacity as activists, as change makers, and as hackers who want to change the system that we are forced to live in. That is, in the past, social movement is perceived or situated in a framework of civil disobedience. So when we talk about the protest, when we talk about people who are gathering on the street, we often reference ourselves as, legacies of Gandhi's or, MLK, Martin Luther King's. And with reference to their protest tactics and strategies and their framework to justify our law-breaking behaviors. But I'm seeing more and more a departure between digital civil disobedience and conventional civil disobedience. So resistance in digital realm, like hacking, like DDoS, like the digital tool we use in the Hong Kong protests, are often seen as cyber crimes rather than civil disobedience. And by not asserting legitimacies to the protesters who engage these tactics, it actually diminishing the moral legitimacy and also the powers of the people. So I think, I would spend like 5 minutes on this philosophical discussion. Again, I don't have a lot of answer to this question, but I feel like if we want to continue our struggle, if we want to scale up our capacities in resistance in the digital realm, we need to talk about how to assert more legitimacy, how to reclaim legitimacy for our behaviors in the futures. So without further ado, let's do a quick overlook of the protest tactics and also the strategies of the movement. So as many of you already know, that the protest movement in Hong Kong begins in June 2019, and it was largely a FaceNet networked movement, and also it is decentralized in its nature, meaning that there's no single protest or social movement organization leading the decision-making effort or coordinating logistics and resources to mobilize people on the street. It was rather mobilized by different small knot of protest groups and also ordinary citizens who perform different functions in the movement. And that has created an unprecedented large scales of uprising in town, where more than 1/3 of the population has in certain point participate in the movement in the past 15 months. And it has created a huge crisis to not just the Hong Kong government, but also the Chinese government. And the protest, although it is diminishing, the protest actions is diminishing during a COVID time, the protest and the resistance is still continuing. And another features of this decentralized movement in Hong Kong is most of the consensus building is based on online deliberations. And while this online deliberation happens and occurs in telegrams, in online forum, it is also influencing more traditional actors like media, like political elite, and also the state. So you can say it is a relatively new forms of social movement, that there's no single leader who can act as the representatives of the protest movement, and thus it makes the regime even more difficult to strike on one single leader or to arrest a single leader and try to stop the movement. And lastly, participants have a relatively higher sense of ownership and autonomy in designing their actions and in designing their protest tactics. And it caused some positive impact, while at the same time some negative impact. But I will go through the negative one later during the presentation. So with higher autonomy, the momentums of protests is actually longer and higher. In the past, one protest actions might last 2 or 3 days, but in the past decade, what we've seen is protest cycle has become longer. So, for example, in Arab Spring, the protest cycle is around 40 days. In the Hong Kong case, it has been a year long, and in the Belarus resistance, it has already endured more than 60 days of resistance. So the protest cycle tends to be longer, and the scale of protest is also larger than before. Now, what are the communication tool, or what is the logic of mobilization behind this very decentralized movement in Hong Kong? So first of all, it was enabled by, of course, digital tool. So at least during June to October 2020, a lot of mobilizations and choice of strategies occurs in the loop that I'm presenting on the PowerPoint slides. That first of all, the strategic discussions is done in an online forum, which is called LIHKG. We call it Linden in Cantonese. So it is an online forum similar to Reddit. And then after the protester decide on whether they should do occupation, whether they should do a citywide blockade, then a lot of mobilization work and coordination work are done through Telegram channel. And I guess most of you knows how powerful Telegram are because of its capacities, its huge capacity to subscribers, and also its instant messaging. It is really helpful in coordinating logistics, while at the same time mobilize the general public to participate in a certain action. Now, after those actions are coordinated and mobilized, then people tend to use social media to express how they feel about their actions, and they will also evaluate the effectiveness of actions through social media like Instagram and Facebook. And again, those feedback would then channel back to online forums and all other online space. And it helps the organizers and protesters to refine and to alter their protest tactics in the next wave. So specifically, in the online forum, there are several features that enable meaningful discussions online. In the most popular LIHKG forum, the algorithms has helped screen and sort the most popular ideas and help those ideas which the largest numbers of users. So for instance, the criteria of having one forum thread to be prioritized on the online forum is how many unique real users were engaging in the thread, how many views are them, how much reading time do the users spend on one single thread, and how many total reaction, including like and dislike, and also subscriptions to a single thread. So in a way, this algorithm helps remove those unpopular ideas or ideas that didn't get a lot of traction and prioritize those threads that has more followers and more engagements with the users. So whenever people open the homepage of the LIHKG, on the top 10 thread, they will see the top 10 protest tactics that are discussing by the netizens. And that helped screen out a tactics that was more likely facilitated by the citizens in town. And another features of LIHKG is also helping in controlling trolls activities. Trolls is really a problem when it comes to online deliberation. So the states can employ a lot of trolls and trying to disrupt the conversation. So for LIHKG, only ISP email can be used to sign up as user, and new users often has a tag on their near to the username, meaning P plate. So for people who are viewing comment made by these new users who are possibly trolls, people knows they are new user, people knows they are not grounded in the community, then people tends to ignore their comment. So it is this little mechanism that helps the LIHKG becomes an important hub of strategic discussion, at least in the beginnings of the protest movement. Now, not a lot of people use this online forum as strategic discussion nowadays because new users who registered their account in June last year has already become old users now. And then there are a lot of trolls who are like trying to disrupt and spread demoralizing message on this online forum. But at least at the beginnings of the protest movement, it has becomes a important hub for strategic discussion. Now, since everyone knows how to use Telegram, I'm not going through the functions of Telegram, but Telegram really helps in two ways. One, it lower cost of content distribution. As you can see on the left-hand side, it is a Telegram channel that are joined by more than 280,000 members. And so in a way, they are a more effective tool to spread protest action information and also to coordinate logistics than other traditional medias or Facebook page of a protest groups. And another effectiveness of Telegram is it also lower cost of communication because people can use bot to coordinate action. So one of the protest tactics in Hong Kong is to galvanize international support. And to achieve international support, a lot of Hong Kong people goes to Twitter and retweet information of the Hong Kong protests. And that's when Telegram bots helps because those bots can help disseminate which tweet to retweet and also which tweets are trending on Twitter so that the Hong Kong people can engage them. And then one quite unique features of the Hong Kong protest is because most of the protesters are young people who are gamers or digital native. The protest is, some of the protest tactics is disseminated like a RPG games. So on the left-hand side, you can see, there are like different protest role in the protest. If you are a peaceful protesters, then there are certain tasks you should do. And if you are a firefighters, meaning those who will put their bodies on the front line and extinguish tear gas casinos, then there are like several tasks they need to achieve. So those tasks and also protest knowledge are open source on Google Docs and website, and there are like a very detailed instructions of what the protesters should wear and what gears and equipment they should prepare before they go into protest. So it feels like an open source protest, as mentioned by professors in Hong Kong, and also like an RPG game that really helps us to flatten the protest tactics and protest knowledge. And another digital tool people would use is to crowdsource intel. So what you are seeing in here is a live heat map, which shows the deployment of police and also counter mobilization. So it helps the protesters to understand their environment and their surrounding, and to identify a safe route to retreat. And then you also have crowdsourced intel like Doxing Act, because there are around 35,000 police officers in town. Many of them have relatives who are protesters, and the protester will send informations and personal data, names, address, ID numbers of those police officers to Telegram channel as a way to deter violence of police officer. It is because when the identities of those police officers are revealed online, they might try to restrain their behavior because their behavior is watched by public eyes. That has become less effective throughout the times, and I will explain why later. Lastly, there's also coordinations of logistics. So as you are seeing in this news footage, a university campus is besieged by a policeman, and the protesters has coordinated motorcycle team and rescue those who are besieged in this university campus. So only through telegrams and cyberspace tour, those tactics are able to be employed and becomes a very powerful tool in terms of coordinating logistics, in terms of mobilizing protesters in devoting their own resources. Now, let's go into some of the effectiveness and risk assessment. First of all, this decentralized features of the protest movement has reshaped protest campaign. As many scholars has pointed out in Arab Spring and BLM protests, and also the latest Netherlands uprising, with so many people engaging strategic discussions and also coordination work online, it exaggerates large-scale protest movement. So it's really easy that one singular event might lead to a massive 1 million people march or 1 million people blockade on the street, which is something that organizers in the past wouldn't dare imagine. It also helped replicate protest tactics to spread rapidly like memes online. So as I have mentioned, those RPG games type of protest menu has really helped flatten protest tactics and help people replicate protest tactics in different parts of town. Also, one of the in the past, protest campaigns are largely led by professionals or middle class or lawyers' daughters, like those figures like MLKs or Gandhi. But when we are imposing in a more decentralized protest features, people tends to be in covert, anonymous, and decentralized. And aside from these characteristics identified by other scholars in the past decade, we are also seeing that the Hong Kong model has also helped sustain grievances and movement momentum by carrying protest network in Telegram channel and also other cyberspace like Facebook groups and other social media platform. So originally, one Telegram channel was set up for the purpose to mobilize people on a single day. And after the day of action, people will stay in the Telegram channel, and it becomes a potential resources for the next wave. And that's what I mean by this digital tool help sustain grievances and movement momentum. Now, and other features that also help in galvanizing popular support is live broadcasting. So let's not exaggerate the importances of telegrams and online forum. Actually, most of the people engage, like most of the protesters engage the protest through live broadcasting in Hong Kong context. And those are the information they receive. Those are the information sources they receive most. And from our research, we observe a very interesting phenomenon, which is the more live stream that the protesters use, the more they agree police was using excessive use of force, and thus it keeps them engaging in protest action and help sustain the movement momentum. However, there's also some negative impact that we need to keep in mind. First of all, because mobilization tool and coordination tool is flattened and also open to different factions and different protesters. The feedback loop to a protest organizer and the feedback loop to a single protest action is shortened. So for instance, on online forum, you will see online thread that says Joshua Wong, which is like the prominent protest figures in Hong Kong. Joshua Wong, please read this thread. And there were like thousands of criticism to his protest choice and his strategies. And Joshua has to respond to these reactions and criticism on Facebook and also Instagram. So in a way, this shortened feedback loop could be harmful, not always harmful, but it could be harmful to long-term protest strategy where immediate impact or immediate effectiveness of a single protest action might not appear immediately, but requires like time. So that's something that we need to keep in mind on how to achieve unities online, while at the same time provide space for protest organizers so that they can plan for a more long-term protest strategies. Also, another negative impact is the discourse that is pervading in cyberspace or in Telegram channel is inheriting pervading prejudice and social stigma like sexism and homophobic. So on your right, there is like a protest ad, and in order, like it was an illustration of protesters who are trying to shame the police officers, and the way that they try to shame the police officers and riot police is to claim that while the police officer were beating protesters on the street, their wife were having free pee with other people at their home. So it is very sexism, and it is inheriting some of the social stigma and prejudice that might be harmful to a movement that fight for democracy. So again, this is something that we need to prevent, try to prevent, and also now other risk. The decentralized movement is successful in helping to coordinate protest logistics and also disseminate content. So the police are start targeting Telegram channel administrator and trying to end their function as a protest hub. So you can see in, on the right, this is a Telegram channel that is shut down by the police. The police storm into the home of the Telegram channel admin, delete all the content of the channel, and post this picture that says the content of this channel is removed by the Hong Kong police as a way to shame and also try to deter other protesters. And through arresting the Telegram channel admin, those police officers were also able to retrieve personal data of subscribers and also protest groups so that they can arrest more people in this protest network. And they achieved this through forensic tools like Celibi, X-Way, those notorious tour that I think everyone in here has heard. Another way that police officers were trying to use in responding this decentralized movement is by torturing Telegram channel administrators so that they would give up their data or unlock their phone, unlock their computer. So this is something that we are challenged the most. Most of the Telegram channel administrators and also ordinary protesters who engage in this digital realm are not professional hackers. They could be engineers who are really familiar some of the tactics in building makeshift barriers. They could be teachers who is specialized in deploying social workers or logistics or money to young protesters. They don't necessarily have the technical knowledge in hiding their identities online. They don't know how to use Tor. They might heard about Tor, but they don't know how to use it effectively. So it is really up to professionals and technicians to help them to access to a tool that can easily be used so that they can protect their identity and thus protect themselves from torture by the police. There's also other bottleneck, which is weaponizations of legal instruments. So in Hong Kong, there is a very notorious criminal ordinance called Access to Computer with Criminal and Dishonest Intent, which is quite similar to the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act in the US. Is it fake? It is deliberately brought, and any crimes that is related to a computer scan phone can be used by the police to charge protesters. And not only that, there are some legal instruments that can be used against protesters. There's also this joint enterprise criminality that the police were the prosecutor that was trying to use to prosecute those who are supporting logistics of the movement. So not only the protesters who are on the front line would be charged rioting. Drivers or motorcycle drivers who assist escape or assist transportation of protesters could also be criminalized under this joint enterprise criminality. There's also colonial law like incitement or public nuisance that the police that is highly fake and abroad that can, again, use to arrest activists and protesters behind the scene. And most importantly, in 2 months ago, China imposed a draconian national security law, which is very fake and broad, and it will force ISP, Internet Service Provider, to give up users' data. So again, as professional or a technician or people who care about privacy and digital security, we are racing against time to provide more secure tool to protesters to fight against this draconian surveillance states that is trying to monitoring everyone on their computers. Lastly, decentralization, although it might favor covert anonymous operation, it might also lead to exaggerated fears when things went south. It is because most of those Telegram channel administrators are not known by the public. They're not public figures. They are not connected with any NGOs or activist community before. The support they receive when they are arrested is much more smaller. And the publicities and information regarding to their arrest is much more smaller than a traditional social activist. So that has created an atmosphere of right terror and exaggerated fear because people don't know what will happen to this arrestee. And it has become a demoralizing factor to many protesters in town. Now I'm running out of time, so I'm just going to briefly talk about the philosophical discussions about civil disobedience in a digital realm. There are several reasons why I think normative discussions of digital disobedience matters. First of all, we are living in a time where the states have so many tools. They have their own hackers, they have massive surveillance tool, they coerce internet service provider to give up data of the users. They set up a draconian surveillance state. And the technology level of the state is outcompeting the capacities of individuals in a rapid pace. So in order to carry out effective disruptive tactics, we need to enhance our digital tool, and we need to invest more in our digital disobedient capacity. Second, theorists and legal community media often disassociate digital obedience or hacktivisms from glorified nonviolent struggle featured by MLKs and Gandhi. And when those hackers arrested by the state with treason, with ridiculously draconian crime, the respect and protection from media, from legal community is much, much smaller than those who put their body on the front line blockading a building. So there is a disassociation between how much care our community gave to practitioners of digital disobedience and ordinary conventional activists. And this is a gap that we need to fill. Thirdly, public moral judgment could influence discretions of law enforcement. So if more general public resonate that digital disobedience is legitimate, it might deter police officer or a prosecutor from using radical and enhanced punishments against those who engage digital disobedience, and thus it provides more protection for those who engage in digital disobedience. Lastly, not always, sometimes, if we manage to assert legitimacy to hackers and also digital disobedience, it might sometimes influence the outcome of convictions and judicial process, because judges, although they don't want to bring political discussion in courtroom, they are nonetheless social animals who would influence by public discourse and public conviction. So again, it might help us create more protection to practitioner. Now, in a very conventional understandings of civil disobedience, like Ross, John Ross, like a legal scholar, it says like civil disobedience is public, non-violent, consensual, and yet political act contrary to the law, usually done with the aim of bringing about a change in the law or policies of the government. I don't really approve this criteria because I feel like it is too thin and too demanding under time where the states have such a disproportionate power against individuals. But even if we take this criteria,
5 minutes.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. What's wrong with DDoS? Right. It is non-violence. What's wrong with people who are trying to shut down a website of a government when the result is similar to blockading a government building, right? So I will stop it in here, and I hope in the future we can assert more legitimacy to resistance in digital realm, and also come up with more solution that we can equip protesters with more tool, with more capacity in fighting this totalitarian regimes. Thank you.
Yes.
So we can go to Q&A sections.
Yes, exactly. That's where we are. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Perfect. Okay. So is there any question from the public? So maybe come here, and so you will be.
Oh, not too happy about that, but hello. Thank you very much for your presentation. Is this on? You can hear me. Yeah, I'm curious about the current state of the protests and where do you see it going? And also I'm curious about how has the Hong Kong government affected or influenced the ability of people to be banked? Have they frozen accounts? Are people do they have problem transacting? Are they using cryptocurrencies, or what's the state in this right now? Thank you.
It's a very broad question. So, Johnson, just try to wrap it up. That's a very broad question. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So very briefly, the repression is enhanced with the draconian national security law. The government is using more severe punishments against the protesters. And more than 2,000 people are either in trials or they received their convictions already. And some of them are charged with really draconian punishment, like 10 years imprisonment. So there are a needs of, like, in terms of cryptocurrency, not a lot of Hong Kong people are using them, but more are trying to do. There are occasions which the government did shut down bank accounts of groups that are trying to support the protest action. So cryptocurrency could be one solution, but the problem is how do we mainstream it, right? And also how do you, because Hong Kong is largely still using paper currencies or so-called state currency. So how do you do the exchange, like with Bitcoins, with the legal realm? So that's the problem that we are facing. I also saw on the chat that there's a question about how we can help as an international community. That's kind of easy. So you see the tool. One thing that you can really help is in one of the PowerPoint slides, you see the police were trying to use different forensic tool in hacking devices of the protesters, right? And they all belongs to foreign government, like in the US or like in the Switzerland. So by blocking this tool from importing into Hong Kong, it's one way that we can deter the capacities of the police and stop them from using enhanced technologies against the protesters. And then there's also other tactics like speak to your representatives impose more policies or measures in helping the protesters in Hong Kong, and also punishing the officials in Hong Kong and in China. Those are the methods that other countries can consider. How do we protect ourselves against impersonators, infiltrators, and trolls? So in digital realm, that doesn't matter, right? Because most of the Telegram channel admin, they were just disseminating information. They were not hoping to do discussions on Telegram channel. So it isn't a problem that trolls or infiltrators were participating in those channels, because those information were going to be public anyway. But then there were trolls and impersonator, police did impersonate themselves as protester during protest action, and that has created a huge problem. That they were arresting people, they were beating people, they were following the more radical protesters. So that's one thing that we have yet resolved or mitigated. Apart from the cause for democracy, is there any movement favor in independence in Hong Kong? Yes. And in Hong Kong, independence has become even more popular than before. 1/3 of the younger population support the advocacies of Hong Kong independence. Now, there's called the Draconian National Security Law, aims at repressing this momentum and also criminalizing the advocacy, like a mere advocacy online or a mere speech online could get people in jail with this Draconian National Security Law. It has the current movement has slowed down because of the coronavirus, because of the social distancing rule, and also because the police were targeting Telegram channel admin and trying to diminish this this channel as a protest hub. So in the future, we might need to consider a hybrid model. So sometimes we use digital decentralized models of social movement, and then sometimes you might need traditional social movement organization who are usually more resilient against repression. So I don't have a good answer in how the movement should go on, but rest assured, the movement is still continuing. A lot of people are engaging in international advocacy, while at the same time, there are still a lot of restaurants and shops who are pro-democracy, and they often organize activities and action to voice out their support to democracy movement. So the movement is not dying down. We are just shifting other tactics and strategy under this repressive regimes.
Okay, so I think time is up. I will maybe give a last chance to the audience sitting here in Prague if somebody has a question. So welcome. So this will be the last question, okay?
Hi. It's very brave what you are doing and in Hong Kong, and it's also the level of protest is very organized. And well, my question is, could you see a future where mere evidence of protest participation could have long-term impact on living in the Chinese world? Maybe, do you think that people that are currently protesting might get banned from the Chinese society, or canceled somehow, or have their WeChat accounts banned or similar?
Yeah, so I think Hong Kong is quite lucky that its society has yet fully integrated in Chinese society. That most of the Hong Kong protesters or Hong Kongers doesn't use WeChat, and they have different tours or private service to choose from. So the government cannot punish those who doesn't support the government through canceling their social service or limiting from accessing to public goods. This is, however, something that Chinese government want to do in the future, at least in the next 10 years. So one thing that Hong Kong need to think about is how do we decentralize not just our protests, but also our daily life. How do we decentralize our currency? How do we decentralize accessibility to public goods so that we can be more resilient against state control over our life? Now, there might be one possibility in the future that Chinese government were trying to set up concentration camp like they do in Xinjiang, in Uyghur regions now, in Hong Kong. And this is something that we need to push back, as not just as in Hong Kong, but also as international community, because this is like crimes against humanity, and China is definitely a leading authoritarian regimes, and if we don't pay enough attention on them, they would just bully other countries like they do to check, and also they were trying to normalize authoritarian practice to other countries. So let's work together to deal with China.
Okay, Johnson, so thank you.